Morning. For some reason, I'm just going to show you what's immediately in front of me. A pair of Christmas trees. Mad, isn't it? They're just growing there. But sure, there's a whole forest, like. Cyclists coming down now, of course, as soon as I hit record. Morning. Didn't even say morning back. Just lashed past. Probably thinks he's a professional cyclist on the Tour de France. So I want to talk about, don't know what to call it, alternative lifestyles, or maybe how to get a mortgage. Something like that. Because here in Ireland, the housing crisis is a huge thing. And it's, I suppose it's damaging and it's dangerous for an awful lot of people. And I think what we have is we have a lot of young people out there, and sometimes not so young. And by young, I kind of think in the 20s, but maybe 30s, even 40s, who haven't got a mortgage or anything and want that feeling, that peace of mind, the security, whatever you want to call it, of owning your own home, having a mortgage. Now look, the question of does a mortgage, i.e. owning your own home, give you actual security? That's a whole other discussion. Because some people have found out that it doesn't mean that at all. And they face eviction and losing their homes and so on, if they lose their job, if they fall on hard times, etc., etc. So the alternative I'm talking about is, I suppose, there's an alternative to getting a mortgage. There's an alternative way of achieving the goal of getting your own house, getting a mortgage. Again, not expert advice. I'm not suggesting you do this. And yeah, I suppose that's a bit of a disclaimer, because I'm not telling anybody to do anything. It's up to you. You are in control of your own lives. Well, my experience is there are ways of getting a mortgage. Now, there's a caveat to that. If you want to live in one of the cities amid all the hustle and bustle and lights and traffic and people and excitement and everything that living in a city brings, then good luck to you. Fair play. That's what you want. You know what you want. Good. Off you go. And if you want to get a mortgage on your own house in that city, yeah, fair play to you. If you've got lots of money, then doable. Absolutely. This could be end of video for you, and off you go. But if you don't, and you ever wonder, are there alternatives? Is there a different way? Is there an easier way? Yeah, there is. The only thing is, I don't think it's going to last forever. But here would be, if somebody was to sit down, a couple was to sit down with me and ask for my advice, or my opinion, or my views, here's what I would tell them. If you want to live in the city, stay in the city, and all that entails, end of conversation. If you're open to living outside the city, in the countryside, in a rural location, or in a much, much smaller town, then you open up your options immediately. And what I'm inclined to do is to break it down to the simplest, cheapest kind of set of circumstances that I can. Let's say you are a couple. Let's say you work in a supermarket, burger place. I'm not going to mention any names here because none of them sponsor me to do so. However, if you're watching, you can sponsor me to do so. My fee is €1,000 per video. But let's say you don't have big fancy job. Let's say you're not on 50, 60, 70 grand a year. And that's in Ireland. That's by no means a massive wage these days. A few years ago, it would be considered great. And it is great, but it's not massive. These days, I think 80 plus is what you would look at and say, oh yeah, that's a good wage. But let's say you're not. Let's say you don't have a big, huge, fancy job. And you're working in one of these places, supermarkets, burger joints, whatever, factories, warehouses, whatever. You know, somebody has to do these jobs, and there are plenty of happy people doing these jobs. The only difference between you and a brain surgeon who's on €1 zillion a year is the money. And if you think, yeah, but that money makes a huge difference, well, he probably has a bigger house, bigger car, newer car, more expensive house, more expensive car, more expensive clothes, and probably goes on more expensive holidays. But what's the real difference? Does he have quality of life? Is he happy? Does he have time? Is he time rich? I'd guess no. He isn't. I keep saying he or she isn't. So you can adapt, and if you're open to living outside of the big cities, and let's say you are on, this is May 2026, okay, as we speak. Let's say you are on 25 grand a year each, and it's nothing to sniff at, but it's quite a low wage, isn't it? Might even be below minimum wage, I don't know, I can't do the maths in my head. But let's say you're only on 25 grand a year, yeah? A bank will give you 4 times your salary. Now this is rough maths, okay? There's maths to be done here. There's outgoings and incomings, and you know that has to be calculated. But roughly speaking, a bank will give you 4 times your combined salary. If you're only on 25 grand a year, that's 200 grand a year. Now imagine if you could get a house for 200 grand, 190, 180, 170. Perfectly good house that you can live in. Maybe it needs a little bit of TLC. But imagine if you could. Well, you can. And if you were to spend a couple of years saving, maybe 2 or 3 years, for the deposit that a bank would require, which is 10%. Let's say you're going for a house, it's 180 grand, right? And you get a decent house out in the country for that. You really would. In May of 2026. The bank will require a 10% deposit of a 180 grand house. That's 18 grand. That's 9 grand each. If you can somehow come up with the likes of that, and then stay in your jobs and keep your credit history and your credit rating nice, smooth, sensible, and keep your bank statements showing that you are paying your rent, you're paying your bills. Let's face it, we all have a little bit of credit card debt every now and again. Some of us live on credit cards, but most of us don't. That's okay as well, because it shows that you're good for paying stuff back. All that credit history, keep it. The bank statements, the whole lot. That shows how financially responsible you are and disciplined. And if you can somehow come up with this example of a 180 grand house out in the country, if you can come up with 9 grand each, that's your deposit. You go to a bank. We're working in jobs A and B. We earn this much and we have savings of this much for a deposit. And you can see our discipline and our history there. You are within, you have as much opportunity to get the likes of that mortgage as anybody else. And I'll say it again, you don't have to be too big high flyers in big fancy jobs with big fancy wages. And if you don't mind living outside of cities, don't mind living in the country, it's doable. A lot of people would not like living in the country. They'd be like, no way, couldn't live out there, couldn't. What would you do for work? And it's like, well, if you're living in a cheap house, you don't need the big city job. The job in the city centre that's paying you 80 grand a year. If you're living in a cheap house out in the country, you don't need those jobs. So maybe you can work in your local town or in your smaller nearby city, something like that, you know. Maybe those jobs will cover you. I can't do all the maths for you. I can only give you ballpark kind of observations, and it is based on experience. So, are there alternative ways of achieving the goal of getting a mortgage and owning your own house? Yes. I would have to say yes. And here's another thing. If you go the cheap house, country house route, you have a very good chance, especially if you're quite young, you have a very good chance of seeing the end of that mortgage or bank loan or whatever it is that you get to buy the house. You have a very good chance of seeing that to the end, and then one day waking up and you owe no money on it. Depends how disciplined you are and how driven you are. But folks, are there alternatives? Do you have options? Yes, you do. Don't be blinded by society.